I just want to say that for those of you who don't know, Pastor Paul Mon is the one who interested me in clothing like this. He's the first pastor I saw wear like a Hawaiian shirt and things like that. So if you have a problem with my suit, you need to take it up with Pastor Mon, because he is my mentor in all things clothing. And I'm not sure he would take that responsibility, but it's good to see you this morning, and it really is. It's wonderful, Pastor Paul, to see you. That such a blessing in the years of ministry that we had together, and the foundation that you were here at Grace Church, even before I was here. What a blessing to be back here. It's good to see those of you who I know, those of you who I don't know. My name is Jeff Denton. I'm the lead pastor at Waterbrook Bible Fellowship in the Metroplex area of Dallas in Texas. We are already solidly into the 90s, heading up into the hundreds for the summer. But before we took off, every day was already in the 90s. So we are ready for summer. And if you would like to come visit us, I recommend you don't. So it is just, unless you really like it to be very, very hot. We've had an outbreak of snakes in our neighborhood. And so that's exactly how I feel. Exactly what you voiced is how I feel with those snakes. It is, it's fascinating. I have been here. I have been away for 11 years this fall. It has been since we left. And I know you're saying, Jeff, you look so young. It couldn't be that you've been gone that long. But we have been down there, and the Grace Church family are the ones who sent us about 11 years ago down to a little church that met in a school that was floundering and in need of a lead pastor at the time. And we've continued to grow the staff, and I bring you greetings from Waterbrook Bible Fellowship, because we really do consider Grace Church to be a sister church of ours, a part of the planting. Waterbrook already existed, but when they sent me, it was for the purpose to go and to help that church begin to grow, which we have. We now have, the staff just continues to grow. We just added another pastor earlier this year, and I couldn't be more excited for what God is doing and for the role that you have had in that. Our campus continues to expand. Our ministry is around the world as we send our teachers and pastors globally to teach, and I get the great privilege and awesome responsibility of getting to be in Asia every year, in Europe every year, spending time around the world teaching and training missionaries and pastors. And as I go out, I just want to remind you that is because you sent me from here at Grace Church first. So on behalf of that, I want to thank you and thank you for allowing us to be here. Did I leave sitting there? Yes, okay. You did a great job of, can I have that? Please, thank you very much. And I want to thank you for allowing us to be here on behalf of the Waterbrook family. Pastor Stephen, I just want to present to you today. Thank you very much, a little gift for being here and for letting me come and preach here. It's not many, I don't know if you drink coffee or not, but okay. I don't, so I just give those cups away because I don't care. I am really, really privileged to be here today. So thank you for that and for your role in sending me to Texas 11 years ago and what God's been doing because of that. I also bring you greetings from my family. Of course, my wife Dina is here, but also Amelia and JJ, who are wonderfully, Amelia's as tall as Dad, JJ is much taller now. I try and take pictures so he doesn't look quite as tall, but it doesn't help sometimes. And they are both back in Texas right now on Mother's Day week. I was able to move both kids back home and for the summer and to have a great time, and we're having a wonderful time. In fact, part of my sabbatical that I'm on right now, we're going to go back to Texas and we're going to sneak back into town and not let anyone know, because we really miss our kids and want to be with them as much time as we can this summer. So we're going to go back and do that, but Amelia and JJ send you their greetings as well. I'm excited about this series that you're in this summer in the Psalms, because Psalms is just such a fantastic book. You're saying, Jeff, why are you wearing this suit today? Thank you very much. I'm glad you asked that question. Because you have to find who you are. And you have to have confidence to wear a suit like this. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. People say, does your wife approve of your outfits? My wife doesn't approve of anything I do, okay? She just is the biggest saint in the world. She is such a blessing to let me do what I do. But I'm going to tell you, you have to find who you are. The Psalms is a great place to do that. In the Psalms, you find a lot of a variety of things that are in there, including it's the place where you can find a discussion about the needs that you have. They're talked about in the Psalms. The fears that you sometimes are gripped by are discussed in the Psalms. The feelings that we feel are in the Psalms. And the people of God and the God that we love are all revealed to us in the Psalms. Can I go to a different microphone here so that I don't have that problem? Perfect. Thank you very much. Today we're going to look at the Psalm that begs the question, do you have a God of every circumstance? Because here's the deal. You're going to have times when you are afraid. You're going to have times when you have anxiety. You're going to have times when you don't know what's going on. And even in the joys, where it is much better to have someone that you are connected to. Listen, when we're at a place in our society where we have hit the highest numbers of anxiety, suicide rates are going up right now, and especially among the young, that there is such great anxiety. Just reading a study by Dr. Tim Elmore about even NFL and NBA players who are the loneliest and the most depressed that they have ever been in the time that they've been doing this study. Those are athletes, they're at the top of their game who have it all. And yet some of them go back and during halftime, they're on their phones looking to see what people are saying about their game, about their performance. They're ridden with so much anxiety. What do you do when you don't know what comes after the diagnosis? What do you do when you don't know what comes with this next transition in life? What do you do when you don't know if you're doing a good job parenting today? What if I'm messing up my kids? What do you do if you're at school and you don't know how the other students are going to react to you? You're going to have someone to turn to. Do you have a God of every circumstance? Do you have a God that you know and who is there for you at all times? For every moment, for every fear, for every need, for every joy, for every hope. Do you have a God you can turn to? I want to consider that in Psalm 121. So turn in your Bibles to Psalm 121. Find that. Psalm 121. It's a great... You have a Bible, right? Either a paper or a digital Bible. Psalm 121. You know, the Psalms are a songbook that they are sung, and especially true of the Psalms 120 to 134. Do you know what's special about those Psalms? Do you know what they're called?
Psalms of Ascent.
The Psalms of Ascent. That's exactly it. Psalm 121 falls within that range. It is one of the Psalms or the songs of ascent. And they were sung as the Israelites, the Jewish people, would climb towards the temple because Jerusalem is built up on a rocky plateau, and you would climb towards the temple for the annual feast, for your worship experience. And so as you would climb up that mountain, you would look up towards the temple and up towards God. A year ago this week, we stood at that temple, and Dina and Amelia and I, here we are with our hands on the south wall of the Temple Mount. We have climbed up the southern steps there, and as we stand against where the gates used to be, the gates are now, you can still see where the arch is, but where the entrances would be, but those gates are now all blocked up and have been for centuries, that they are closed so that the Christians can't enter there anymore. But right up on those steps are the same steps that Jesus would have walked, and as he would have sung the Psalms of Ascent, those Psalms from 120 to 134. Pilgrims coming to worship God would sing these Psalms of Ascent, and they would be reminded that God is always their source of strength, their source of hope, their safety, and that God is always watching them. Just a comment on these Psalms of Ascent. What we know about the 14 Psalms we have here are that David wrote 4 of them. Solomon wrote 1 of the Psalms. If you look at the introduction at the beginning of a Psalm, you'll often see that. If there is a note on it, if it tells us who wrote it, it's distinguished there. But there are also 10 others in the Psalms of Ascent that are anonymous. We don't know exactly who wrote them, and Psalm 121 is one of those Psalms. Let's look at Psalm 121 and see if we can discover a God of our every circumstance. In the first 2 verses we see here a question. Where does our help come from? When you have a need, when you have a fear, when you say, I need some help right now, where does your help come from? And that's the question the psalmist begins with. Verse 1, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? That's the question. Where does my help come from? Say that question with me. Where does my help come from? Say it. Where does my help come from? You have asked that at one time or another. Now, it might be that you've just cried out, God, help me. Or, why doesn't anyone help me, in frustration? But everyone in here, I guarantee, at one time or another, has cried out for help, for something. And that's what we see here. You can identify with this question. Where does my help come from? And then the answer, my help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Let's talk again about walking up towards the temple. That here is a picture of the Temple Mount. What you see is up on the left is the temple. The Temple Mount is up there. Up on the top right hand is the Mount of Olives that would have been up there where Jesus would have gone to pray. Then you go down into the Kidron Valley. I took this picture from the city of David near Hezekiah's tunnels towards into the Kidron Valley with all of this. And what you see is anytime you're going to approach the temple, if you're going to walk towards the temple in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, you're going to walk up a hill. You're going to climb. So your eyes can't help it but look up as you approach your worship experience. As you're approaching God, you're going to lift up your eyes to the hills and you're going to say, where does my help come from? If you're going to worship God, you're going to climb this mountain. As you approach, you end up climbing the steps that enter the Temple Mount. And I have our friend Andy who's here in a picture. These are those southern steps that I was talking about that we had walked up and we sat on these. That is the southern wall of the Temple Mount. You can't see in this picture, but there are the arches where the gates used to be. You would walk right up these steps and into the temple. Here we find our feet, Dina and I, we have our feet on the untouched stones. So these are still part of the steps that have never been replaced. These would have been the same steps that Jesus walked up as he would have walked to the temple. What you notice, can we go back to that last picture, Jacob? I want to just point something out. If you'll notice, the steps are different sizes as you walk up towards the temple. Do you see that? They're not a regular size. And they change from step to step. Why do you think that is? What's that? Yeah, to stop and pray. So here's what you do with the Psalms of Ascent. There are 14 big steps up on the southern steps to the temple. How many Psalms of Ascent did we just see there were? There were 14 of them. 20 to 134. 15. 15, right? Anyone good at math? 20 to 134 is how many? 14. 14? 15. I think you have to count 20 as one, right? Okay, so let's say because there are 15 steps. So there are 15 Psalms of Ascent. And what some have suggested is that they, well, not suggested, we know this is true, that they would walk up in the Mishnah, we have this recorded, that they would walk up and when they'd hit a big step, they would stop and they would pray one of the Psalms of Ascent. Or they would sing it. And so you would have during the feasts, there would be people filling these steps and they would go up a step or two and then they would stop and they would turn to Psalm 120 and they would sing it. And up another step or two, the next big step, and they would sing Psalm 121. And there are all these people, hundreds and hundreds of people, walking up these steps, singing their praise to the Lord as they approach him, making sure their hearts were tuned to who God is. And so then, go on past this, and this picture right here is the group that we were with last year, the Waterberg group. That here we are, we sit on the steps, and you'll see a little bit behind there if you can tell where the arches are. Those gates are all blocked up now. There's one gate where Christians can go into the Temple Mount anymore. The rest of them are all only for Muslims, since Islamic groups control the Temple Mount now in Jerusalem. But it's still there, the steps that Jesus walked up to worship. Jesus would have climbed these steps, singing the Psalms of Ascent. If they are appropriate for Jesus, do you think they're also appropriate for us? Someone say yes. Yes. Okay, absolutely. Jesus would have climbed these steps and he says, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? He's looking up this hill and he's reminded, my help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. As you come to worship, you're affirming your trust and your faith in God. And true of when you come to worship on a Sunday morning, but anytime you're coming before the Lord in his word or to pray, just to remind yourself of who he is, it is this reminder, and it is to proclaim that you trust your help comes from the God who created you. Notice here, then in verses 3 to 8, there is a transition. The first two verses were in first person. Verses 3 to 8 end up being in third person. So maybe the first two verses were like a student who proclaimed this or asked this question, where does my help come from? Oh yes, my help comes from the Lord. And then a teacher steps in verses 3 through 8, or someone to endorse and to explain, to help this student, this questioner understand. And so it changes the tense of who's talking. Verses 3 and 4 are verses that I have repeated to my children for years. I pray them over them all the time from the time they were very, very little. My kids can quote these verses to you, not because we ever stop to intentionally memorize them, but because they've heard me say them so many times. Here's what they say. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The same God who watches over Israel, the same God who watches over his people, the Jews, that same God watches over you. If you believe that God had his chosen people, if you believe that God had called the Jewish people his own, and that he cares about them, which we know from Scripture, then he cares about you just as much. And he never sleeps. He always watches over you. For those of us who worry, I don't know if we have any worriers in here. If you ever find yourself filled with anxiety and concerned about something, you can have the assurance that you can rest at night when you're laying there worrying about things, that God will stay up, that God will be awake. You don't need to be. You can find peace in this God who watches over you. He isn't uncaring. He isn't ignoring you. That God is always alert and he's always watching over you. That's a great comfort in the midst of the storms of life. Verses 5 and 6 continue to clarify that idea. And they say, the Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. And the sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. God watches over you and keeps you safe in the heat of day and in the dangers that lurk in the night. Whatever it is that you are afraid of, whether it is this person at work, the things that you see at the day, this situation at school, boy, paying these bills that worry me, my finances right now, my health, whatever it is, those things that you can confront, that you can look at and maybe deal with head on. Those dangers in the daylight, God is there to take care of them. He's there to be with you in them. What about the things that I lie in bed and I just worry about? Will my kids be okay? Will I have enough money to make it to the end? What about what could happen to me? What about terrorists? What about things that could come out of the dark? What about things that I don't know if they're there that could scare me? What about snakes when I go outside with the dog in the early morning and it's dark and I can't see them? See, in the dark, in the unknown worries and the things that you find yourself afraid of that you can't control, you have no say in, and you don't even know if they're coming, there's an assurance that God will take care of them. Many of us worry about things we have no control over. God is watching, and he will take care of you in those. He will care for you in the dangers. Verses 7 and 8, the Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Whether you're inside or you're outside, whether you're home or far away, whether you're near or far, wherever you are, God never loses sight of you. So you can't hide from God. You can't run from God. You can't go somewhere where he can't protect you, where he can't keep you in his hands. That God always sees you. He always knows. Again, let's talk about our anxieties for a moment. When we're worried, when we're scared, I don't know if God can take care of this. That's a faith question right there. Because we're reminded. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. He is with you always. Where is it that you're afraid most at? Where does that fear strike you the most? It's the drive to work when I'm just worrying about the day. It's at night when I lie in bed. It's when my kids are out and they have the car and I don't know where they're at. It's when I don't get a chance to talk to that person I care about. I just sit around worried about them. What is it? Where is it that you find yourself filled with anxiety? Would you be reminded that in that place, and maybe some of you need to put a little card on your dash in the car, or you need to put a note next to your bedside, that, okay, God doesn't leave me, He doesn't forsake me. He is with me wherever I am. To remind yourself that He's there for you and that God never loses sight of you. If I stand here and I see you, if I turn around, can I see you? Yes, you know. I know that you're there, but if I turn around and I can't see you, I could forget that you're here. Sometimes I walk and I put headphones in and I end up singing along with whatever I'm listening to in the morning when I'm out, and I won't notice that someone is behind me. And I'll be talking to myself, I'll be singing, and then all of a sudden someone comes up alongside me who's going faster than I am. And for a moment, it's embarrassing. Do you ever have that happen? You didn't know that they were there. Have you ever, walked in, been in a room and thought you were all alone and you said something, and then you realized someone was there? Have you ever walked into a room and belched or had flatulence and not realized someone was there and were embarrassed? See, you think there are these times when you're all alone, but God is there with you. Well, what happens when you can't see Him? Well, you probably turned around. There's a reason they call it, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? It's so that you're reminded that when you got to climb, you got to look to God. Sometimes we put our eyes down and we forget to look up. We're more concerned about where we are and where we're stuck at than we are about where we're going and who's ahead of us. That's why they would lift up their eyes to the hills where their help comes from. We were climbing the pyramids down in Mexico. The Incas were, and they're very, very dangerous. They're not worried in Mexico about the laws that we have here, so it's not like an amusement park or someplace where everything is safe. We're climbing up these little tiny, and they're rounded steps from being so old. And all there is a rope on one side to hang on to, and you're just climbing. And you got to keep looking up because you don't know when the person in front of you is going to slip. And if they slip and fall, guess what? It catches you and you both go. You can't look down. You've got to keep looking up as you climb. Because it's more of a danger if you're not watching where you're going and looking ahead of you. The key word in this book, in this chapter 121, that's repeated over and over, is a word in Hebrew, shamar, or it's the word you see interpreted watches. Look at how many times it is in here that the psalmist reminds us that God watches you. He can watch you. He can see you wherever you are. He watches over you. It could also be translated protects you. When you think you're alone, when you think you've been abandoned, when you think no one cares, would you be reminded? God still cares. God is still watching. He is still there for you. It doesn't mean that there's never any danger in life. God never promises us that. It doesn't mean that there's no risk of getting hurt. But God sees you all the time, and He knows what you can take, no matter what you're facing. And He never abandons you in troubled times. So be reminded to trust Him. I don't know what your fear is right now. I don't know what your concern is. But listen, I know you've got it. I know you've got something that produces anxiety. I know you've got a question that's hanging over your head that you're just not sure how it's going to come out. There are a lot of unknowns in front of you. All of us. All the time. And we think sometimes the Christian thing to say is, nope, God's got it under control, so I'm all okay. I don't need to worry about anything. That's not actually what this is about. This is about the moments when you acknowledge, this is my fear. Fear itself isn't a sin. What you do with fear can be a sin. But to give that fear over to God, to recognize, no, I'm afraid. Is courage the absence of fear? No. Courage is the ability to step out in the face of fear. And you don't have courage if you don't know who's on your side, if you don't know who's got your back, if you don't know who it is that you're following. So you got to keep going, and you got to trust the one you're looking up to. Every good parent has to let go of the hand of their toddler at some point. A child can't walk unless you put that toddler down on the floor. You'll never see them walk. Sometimes you wonder, God, why have you abandoned me? And the truth isn't He's abandoned you. He's just set you down to let you take a step, to let you try and walk on your own. Doesn't mean He's not there. It's like teaching your kid to ride a bike. You know, God is the Father who runs along behind us, and He's there, and He gets us going, and we're like, okay, you're holding on, right? But then sometimes God lets go, not because He lets you out of His sight, but He's letting you learn how to go forward. That's the application of faith. And He cheers you on as you keep going, but He's also still there. So that when you do inevitably fall over, when you do skin a knee, that God is there to say, it's okay. Doesn't mean He wasn't protecting you, because you know this, you've raised kids. You let them make mistakes. You let them fall. They don't grow and learn how to get up if they don't learn how to fall. What you're doing as a parent is providing a safe environment for them to fall. Now think about this. God is that parent for you. It's not that He isn't going to let you fail. It's not that He isn't going to let you face a danger now and then. It's not that He isn't going to let you get skinned up by life sometimes. But He is there. Because He doesn't turn around and lose sight of you. He doesn't forget about you. He's always there. So that you can have confidence in Him and step out in faith. And then when you fall, when you skin your knee, when things don't go like you thought they would, when things in life fall apart, when you get abandoned by that person, when you get scared and think you can't go on, that God is there to remind you, no, I'm here. I'm the safe environment that allows you to get back up and give it another shot. I'm the parent that stands next to you and goes, no, you can do it, get back on the bike, keep going. That's who God is. He's there to encourage you and watch over you and say, you can make it. If you trust Him, then He'll take your trust and your faith and He'll bloom it into something much more than you can imagine. So I went by the McDonald's on the way here, and I got a drink. I have a problem, though. I just noticed. What am I missing? I'm missing a straw. Any idea? What do I do now? Open it up, it's filled with my drink. Oh, I can take the lid off, but then I might spill it on myself. I don't know. I don't want to spill something on my suit. I would hate to do anything that would make the suit look bad, okay? So what, anyone want to suggest that maybe I look in the sack for the straw? Do they sometimes put it in there? I'm jumping off. So sometimes they put it in here, right? Is there a straw? Oh, there is the straw right there. See, there is the straw. It was there all along. Okay. There it is. It was right there. It was right there, in there the whole time. Okay. There is the straw. Okay, there's the straw. Yeah, okay. Well, sorry about that. I didn't realize that the straw was this big. Uh-oh. Here's the straw. Okay. See, here's the deal. I didn't see the straw because I didn't look. But the straw was there the whole time. Did you think the straw was in there? No, you are lying. You didn't know this straw was in there. I tell you that there are times in life when you got to trust God, that God is about to do something that is really cool. God is about to pull out something that you didn't know. And the time when you're afraid, see, when you're afraid of what comes next, is the moment where if you trust God, you're giving him the opportunity to do something absolutely amazing. If you forget that God is there to take care of you in those moments, then you're saying to God, I don't want you to step in. I want to worry about this. I want to handle this myself. I want to be responsible for it. Who would you rather have responsible for your life? You or God? Most of us, many of us in church say, well, God, I want God to be responsible for my life, but we live like we want to be responsible for our lives. We live and try and make things happen ourselves. When you trust God and can walk in faith, because you know that he's behind you to cheer you on, he's in front of you to lead the way, he's beside you to accompany you, he's above you to protect you from the heat of the day, and he's below you to help carry you when you can't get up on your own. And if you'll just say, you're right, God, I want you, because you can pull out things that I can never imagine that only God can do. So when you consider life, do you recognize that God is there? Do you recognize he's there for every moment? And is he there for your every circumstance? Is there something in your life that you're trying to keep him away from? Jesus came and died on the cross for every sin. And if you as a believer can embrace that fact of faith, yes, Jesus died so that my every sin would be forgiven. If God cares so much about you that that is true, then why would you doubt that he doesn't care about your every circumstance? Oh no, he cares about my every sin, he doesn't care about my every need. He cares about my every sin and he took care of that, but he doesn't care about my every circumstance. He cares about every sin, but he doesn't care about every area of my health. He cares about my every sin, but he doesn't care about, my finances. Can you be a person of faith who says, Jesus died to take care of every sin, and not believe that God cares about every other part of your life? I would say to you, you can't. You're choosing to divide your faith and to apply it only as you want to, instead of as Jesus brought it for your entire life. Not just your sin, your worries, your doubts, your fears, your hopes, your joys, all of it. So, let me ask you this. What danger do you face today that you feel God is not capable of handling? Are you willing to say, okay, God, I'll give this to you today? What fear do you face that you feel God can't calm down? Are you willing to say, okay, God, you know how scared I am. I'm giving this to you today. What sorrow do you have right now where your heart is broken? And you to this point have just said, God has not brought any peace. Are you willing to believe that he can bring peace in your sorrow and comfort? And what joy do you have that you think God didn't provide? Nope, I did this. I'm the one who provided this joy in my life. Are you willing to say, no, God provides my every joy? Because I look up to the hills where my help comes from, where my protection comes from, where my support, where my leadership comes from. And it all comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Will you accept that he is there for your every circumstance, your every moment? I have for you today, whether the place is in a temple or a sanctuary in a church, we know that God is there with us when we worship. Yeah, I get that. But what about in the dark places, in the desert? He's still there. He's still there. That's what Psalm 121 reminds us. And you can trust that he's always nearby, always there for you. So, we know, I mentioned earlier that in the Mishnah, we know that they would sing these psalms of ascent as they would walk up and worship. I want to do this as I conclude this sermon. I want us to praise God with Psalm 121. I'll use the version from Eugene Peterson's The Message, but I'm going to ask you to stand and read this psalm with me as we come to a song here in just a moment, that God would speak to your heart exactly what you need today. So we'll put this on the screens and we're going to read this together, since it's a little different version of it. And I want you to just read this out loud with me. These 8 verses as a prayer of faith from your heart to who God is for you today. Let's read this together in worship. I look up to the mountains. Does my strength come from mountains? No, my strength comes from God, who made heaven and earth and mountains. He won't let you stumble. Your guardian God won't fall asleep, not on your life. Israel's guardian will never doze or sleep. God is your guardian, right at your side to protect you, shielding you from sunstroke by day, sheltering you from danger in the dark at night. God guards you from every evil. He guards your very life. He guards you when you leave and when you return. He guards you now. He guards you always. Lord, let this be the prayer of our hearts today, tonight, this week, whenever we need assured of your watchful presence in our lives. Amen. Amen.